There's no question that this culture is going through a weak men's crisis. The thought that men should not be masculine, that masculinity is toxic, is what got us in this problem in the first place. That's why I love to interview men who are leading with power, men who are not afraid to talk their truth, men who are making a difference. So in this podcast, I interview Adam Allred, and we talked about what it takes to be a man. What does it take for a man to be shaped and molded? Because in this culture that wants to have men who are passive, it is more important than ever to have men who are leading with power. So I hope you get value from this podcast, and comment and subscribe, because we need more men to hear this message, the message of what does it take to be a leader in this culture. Enjoy. Welcome to the King's Code Podcast. All right, welcome to the King's Code Podcast. My name is Raul Velasquez, and I have a special guest today. Adam is one of those guys who, if you watch his content, man, you finish ready to go walk through a fucking wall, man. So I can't wait to hear your story, Adam. Welcome to the King's Code Podcast, man, and it's a pleasure to have you, brother.
Glad to be here, man. I appreciate it, and likewise.
So we were just talking a little bit before the podcast how like more men need to hear the message of being men. Like right now, the culture is just creating what we call sedated warriors. So Adam, what's your take right now on the current culture of men? Where do you see men right now, and what's the insight that you've gotten from coaching, young men to coaching leaders into how to level up in life?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. So I've been in door-to-door sales for the last 20 years. It's what I started doing in college to pay for my way through school. And then I just got into it and started businesses. I've got a lot of businesses now that I've started and sold and I have currently that have been built off of door-to-door sales. And primarily we build these companies with door-to-door sales marketing of college kids, mostly young men. So I've been dealing with young men for 20 years. I was a young man when I started. And I've seen a couple of things that's given me a lot of insight in that space. One, the quality of guys that we get nowadays are not as good as the quality of guys we got 20 years ago. The kids are softer. They're not as good largely. There's exceptions to this, but it's just more of a common rule. There's a lot of entitled kids. There's a lot of kids that haven't really had any real life lessons or experience, haven't transitioned to being a man, these college kids. And so that it kind of opened my eyes up to that about what's going on a larger level in the country or in our country, in the world around us. And I've, over the last few years, just become more and more aware of the type of messaging that is given to young men from society, from church, from culture, from families. And it's really bad. It's like the worst kind of messaging and advice that you can give. We're given to young men nowadays. And so I don't put this on them. I just think we're in a time period in our country where things are so upside down. Everybody's confused, and particularly young men, about who they are, what it means to be a man. There's no mentorship for young men anymore. There's no one teaching them what the path of a man is. A lot of these young men are getting raised by single moms, and then they go to school with a female teacher. And then they are conditioned by all of these elements to be subservient and second class to the feminine energy, which is doing nobody any services. It's not good for the women. It's certainly not good for the men. And because these kids have no mentorship, because they don't have anybody that's teaching them what it looks like to be a man, what it means to be a man, they start to believe this stuff. And it's, I think it's the biggest threat we face in our day is how weak men have become. And so I've just started, sharing some of my musings. I don't consider myself an expert of anything per se, but I think, social media is the proverbial town square where ideas are shared nowadays. And so I just started popping off some of my own ideas, and it's got a lot of traction. I've gotten a lot of followers from it, and had a lot of really good feedback from young men and men in general, older men as well, that are resonating with the message of what does it mean to be a man. And what does it mean to kind of step up into that role? What does that look like? And it's been a really incredible journey in the last few months of doing this, honestly.
Yeah, it takes me back to raising my son. He's 18 years old now, and I remember when he was growing up, like my biggest fear when I had my son was like, am I going to be a good enough father? Right? Am I going to be able to provide for him? Am I going to be able to deliver for him what it's like to be a father? And I think a lot of us will learn from our fathers, right? We learn from the people around us. And you said it, statistics show that over 70% of young men right now are being raised by single mothers. So right now, marriage is under attack. Masculinity is under attack. And instead of complaining about it, I think as men, we need to do something about it. Right. So you see in these young men that they go to you, they're looking for guidance. What are some of the statistics that you're seeing? Are you seeing that these men they don't have a good relationship with the father, or they were raised by mothers, or they just say, man, fuck you to my dad, I'm just gonna do my own thing? What are some of the patterns that you see in these young men?
Yeah, I think a little bit of all of that, especially with kids being raised by either single moms or divorced parents, or dads that are checked out. And, I think this has been not just our generation. I think this is a multi-generational thing. I think over the last, my opinion, 50, 60 years, maybe we've really seen this degradation and this attack on masculinity. And it's stronger than it's ever been now. Like, it's just super prevalent. So I think the fathers of these young men, they don't sit down like traditional fathers used to do, or like society used to do. I mean, it used to be in society, men would gather around the campfire, at the end of it. This is across all cultures and throughout time. Men would gather around the fire every night, and they would talk about masculine issues. And the young men would sit back and listen to the elders of the tribe and to their fathers talk about what it means to be a man, what it means to be part of the community. And they would learn how to transition. They would get this help from transitioning from a boy into a man. And every society has had these rites of passage baked into them of how to transition a boy to a man. And almost always this included some sort of removing them from their mother's household, like taking them into the masculine tribe. And that was what was their, what guaranteed the future of that tribe, that the tribe was going to continue, was the strength and the masculinity of their men. And I think largely that's been removed from our culture with devastating consequences, where we don't really have rites of passage for these men anymore. We don't have fathers that know what it is even means to be a man, if they even are lucky enough to have a father. And so, yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. There's just a lot of that.
I think it started to allow in school when they took away all the framework of believing in God, right? I remember going to school and we had the Pledge of Allegiance, right? I remember like having the church even like pray for young men. Now we're seeing the transition of like, hey, you be your own man. You have to, you have to be self-made. But the reality is nobody's self-made. Like if I look back, my grandfather, he was an immigrant. My father was an immigrant. Like I wouldn't be able to do what I do unless those men poured onto me. Like give me some tough love, but at the same time, help me accountable to a higher standard. I think that's what we're seeing right now is men just giving up on themselves. I mean, look back at the Al Bundy era, right? I grew up, Al Bundy, Bart Simpson, what was that? Homer Simpson, right? That was the model, right? And now we're seeing that's what's been taught. Now, like you have it's okay to have what do they call it? Dad bod, right? It's okay for you to be overweight. It's okay for you to drink. It's okay for you to become what I call a sedated warrior. So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you, like you went in your 20s, you started a company. Like I have a framework of the stages of a man, right? The first stage is the peasant, right? As in our 20s, we become peasants. We become entitled, right? Then we become warriors. Then maybe in our 30s, we hit a warrior stage. But then somewhere along the line, we lose our edge and we become the sedated warrior. That's what I call a man who lost his edge, a sedated warrior. So was there a time in your life that you said, well, I was a peasant at this age, then I had a warrior stage. Was there a sedated warrior stage in your life that you felt like, fuck, man, things were not working the way I wanted to, and I had to like break through that dark tunnel to become who you are right now? Give us a little bit of background of your journey.
Yeah, I guess there's probably been numerous moments like that. I like the way that you articulated that. So I think there's been multiple times in my life where things weren't going the way that they was supposed to go, and you had to really dig deep and find what you would just say the warrior inside of you. And probably first started really when I was in college and I started doing summer sales, and I realized, there was no one coming to save me. Like it was my life that I had to take accountability for. And so I couldn't lean on my parents anymore. I couldn't expect them to be there to take care of stuff if it didn't work out right. I had to figure out how to pay for school, how to pay for my living, how to pay for life. And I started doing this really, really difficult thing of knocking doors in the summertime. And, that was a process that has really shaped me in a number of ways. And there was a couple elements to that, to your point, of part of the door-to-door sales experience. One is when I would go out for these summer times in between semesters at school, you go with a tribe of largely other men, and mostly young men, that you would have mentors. You'd have managers that were seasoned, had been doing it for a few years. So you got a lot of mentorship, and you had this tribe environment. And I think the tribe, the masculine tribe, is one of the things that we are lacking the most in our society today. And in fact, that's kind of what you're doing online, what I've been on my process, try and create an online social media tribe that guys can be a part of, that we can sit around the kind of proverbial campfire and talk about these things and these issues and level each other up. But I had, and guys give that up as soon as, how many men do you know, boys, as soon as they get into a relationship with a woman, they sacrifice their tribe. And it's like the absolute worst thing that they can do, because we need men around us to call us out on our bullshit. We need men around us that we can open up to and talk about our issues and not unload them on our women. And so I had that with my summer sales experience. I had that tribe experience, and that was something that really carried me through that process, I think, of, the peasant into the warrior stage. And then I don't know what the next stage is after that. What would you say is after the warrior?
So the warrior either become a sedated warrior, then you start acting like you have everything together, but inside you're full of insecurities. You're full of doubt. You're full of fear. You lost your purpose. Usually that's when you go into a dark tunnel. So I believe that's the rite of passage. So when I went through my dark tunnel, that's the rite of passage for me to find my edge to become what I call the king. A king is a man that owns himself. A king is a man who knows he has purpose. A king is a man, he's here in this earth for a reason, and he's not going to stop until his mission is complete. So that's, you have two choices. You become the sedated warrior, and you're like, oh, this is as good as it's going to get. I'm not going to continue to grow. I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to drink. I'm just going to play the game not to win anymore. Play the game just not to lose, or, fucking go all in and do more than what you're capable of. So did you go through a sedated warrior stage? Did you go through a stage of what I call the tunnel, where some people call it midlife crisis, some people call it losing themselves. Did you go through that journey at one time?
I think I've gone through that journey multiple times. I think that's part of the process of being a man, is that you're going to get tested and you're going to get your ass kicked. And then even when you're operating at a high level, the trials come, but you're in fighting shape for them. And so I've always articulated that a little bit different. I like how you're saying that. So that's good food for thought for me. But I've always thought of this. There was a doctrine that the Puritans had, these early immigrants to America that were escaping, the tyranny of England, and were coming for religious freedom. And they had this doctrine called the regenerative descent, which is, I think, kind of what you're saying. And this is how I've always articulated in my head, is that in order to ascend, you first have to descend. You have to go into a dark place. You have to go on this hero's journey. And the level to which you can ascend is going to be directly matched with the level with which you descend. And so this journey, or this process as men to go into the darkness or into the tunnel, like you said, is absolutely paramount to your progression. Like, you have to have those moments, because without them, this is exactly what you're saying. We're just on the same wavelength. Without having those dark times, you can never become the man that you're destined to be. And so I've had multiple of them, but I'll just give you one story. When I was on my first summer knocking doors, so I didn't have any context. I didn't know what I was doing. I was this young, naive kid that was just trying to figure out how he could pay for school. I got recruited to go out to Detroit, Michigan, and go knock doors in the inner city, like down in the hood. And I'm this naive kid from Utah. I didn't grow up in Utah. I grew up in the military, so I had some worldly background and had a lot of experiences with different cultures. But it was the first time that I was going to the hood to go knock and work and try and make a living for the summertime. And I was knocking doors. I had this idea. The company that I was working with, they recruited me that summer out of college. They said if I sold 100 accounts in a summer, that would pay me 40 grand. It just blew my mind. $40,000. I couldn't believe it. I could earn that in the summertime. And I had about 100 working days. So I was like, I could sell one a day. Hopefully I'll be able to sell one a day. And I got out there and I knocked for my first day and I didn't sell anything. And I knocked the second day and I didn't sell anything. And I knocked the third day and I didn't sell anything. And by the end of that third day, I was really struggling, because it was the hardest I'd ever worked in my entire life. And I was really like in this dark place. And so I at the time I was reading this book by Collins and LaPierre about Gandhi, and how Gandhi had fasted to keep the Muslims and the Hindus from killing each other. And he fasted for like 30 days or some insane amount of time to bring peace between these two rivals. And so I was like, well, if I can fast till I make a sale, I'll do that. Like, I'll exercise my faith and I'll fast. So the fourth day I fast, and I'm going without food or water. I'm running door to door. It was unseasonably hot in Detroit that time, as this is in May. And I'm running door to door. And at the end of my fourth day, I don't have a sale. I have nothing. And so I'm going into my fifth day, And by the evening time, I still didn't have a sale. So I'm 40 hours-ish into this fast with no food or water. I can't function. I can't speak. I can't even deal with customers. I'm knocking on people's doors. I can't even get out a cohesive door approach because I'm so empty of calories and I'm so just struggling physiologically. And I'd gone from a run to a slow walk. And there was this Little Caesars pizza down thing on the corner that I'd been looking at the last 2 days because I was hungry. And there was a Little Caesars down there. And I walked down to that corner and I bought a little hot and ready pizza and I got a 2 liter of Sprite. So I didn't make a sale. I'm having not only this like financial crisis, I have no money and I need money. I'm having this identity crisis. I got no confidence. It's been stripped away from me. Like all the things I thought I was good at, talking to people and being confident, is gone. I'm having this faith crisis that I had fasted and I'd gone 40 hours and I didn't have a sale. And I sat there on that corner. You had to sit outside. They didn't have seating inside. So I'm sitting outside in this parking lot with this hot and ready and this 2 liter Sprite and I'm eating it. And it's like the worst thing you can do on an empty stomach. So now I'm starting to get sick and there's broken glass, there's used contraceptives, there's used shell casings like in this parking lot. And I recognized that was rock bottom for me at that point in my life. Like that was as low as it got. I had nothing and I wanted to quit. I was like, this isn't working out for me. And I'm wrestling with this. Do I just go home? Like I gave this the college try, 5 days. I've got nothing to show for it. And I had this wrestle there kind of with me and God, because that's all I had left was just me and God. I had nothing else to lean on. And I don't remember exactly the process that occurred there. It was the darkest point in my life, though, ever. And I've had many darker moments since then, but that was the moment there for me that became this catalyst and crossroads for so much. And I don't know exactly what transpired in that time that I sat there on that corner, processing everything, talking with God about it. But I decided when I got up not to quit. And I decided that no matter what happened that summer, however bad it got, if I came home with no sales, that I was going to finish it. Like that was important to me. That was my walk away with God. Like, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, Lord. I'm just going to go forward and not quit. And that's what I decided to do. And that night I sold 2 security systems. And the next day I sold 2 security systems. And the next day I sold 2 security systems. And I was selling 3 every day. And within 2 weeks, I was the #1 guy in the entire company out of 300 people. And I was getting guys calling me up from HQ, like who had no idea who I was. Like, dude, what are you doing? You're killing it out there. What's your secret? And I'm like, I don't know, bro. I fasted and then I just didn't quit. Like I didn't learn anything secret or anything like that. But I did. And that was that when you make up your mind, this was the secret to it that I have reflected on so much over the years and has carried me through so many other hard times in my life, is that when you make up your decision to not quit, no matter what comes, hell or high water, you're going to see it through. You trust yourself. You gain this trust for yourself that you can't get any other way. And you trust yourself and you have respect for yourself, which I'd never understood that concept prior to that moment out in Detroit of learning how to really respect myself and finding myself somebody that I could trust so that when it got hard again, when the shit hit the fan again, I didn't quit. I didn't buckle. Like I had been tested in this furnace and now I could do that again. And if it was even hotter the next time, I could just double down and get, even tougher the next time. And I believe that. And that's been the story of my journey as an entrepreneur over the last, 20 years as I went through this process of door-to-door sales and then into business of just being tested many times, like much harder tests than even that, but always finding myself that I could trust that process with me and God in that arena, that sacred time. It's a sacred time when you're going through the tunnel, when you're in that darkness. You can get lost in it. There's a lot of danger to it. You cannot come out of it. You might not redeem yourself. You might get lost in victimization or feeling sorry for yourself, or it might break you. But if you have the courage to keep going, the courage not to quit and to trust yourself and trust God, trust the process, then it becomes this redemptive force in your life. Like I have ascended because of those moments in my life to heights I never expected or even hoped for.
But I think that's the hardest thing to trust. What it sounds to me that you went from the peasant, the entitled, like I'm knocking on doors every day. I should get a sale, right? I'm fasting. God should bless me, right? So that's entitled mentality. Like you should do this. You should get the results you want because you're doing supposedly the work, right? And that's when God is saying, do you feel that you deserve this, or are you all in this? Can I trust that when things go hard, you're not going to abandon me? Can I trust that? Like it's like Job, right? Everything happened to Job, and at the end, he didn't betray God. He still honored God, right? So, what process do you have when shit ges hard? When this moments? I mean, I believe entrepreneurship, man, is a spiritual game. When I train entrepreneurs, it's like, man, this is not a mindset game. Mindset is one level. The spiritual game is a whole different level, because sometimes the mind is going to betray you. The mind's going to tell you, man, you should have more, right? You should be ahead of the game. But the spirit and your soul knows this is just part of the game. This is part of one step closer to who you were destined to be. So what's your process when, shit gets hard and it feels like, the world is in your shoulders and you may not have the answer, you may not know what to do? How do you get connected to a place where you actually are obedient and follow through on the things that you have to commit to do?
Well, I think that's a really good question. So I have a couple of answers to that. And maybe if I thought about it more, I'd have some more insight. But one, I think what I have learned is that life is like a video game, right? Whatever God has created down here, it's kind of like a simulation video game, and that there's these purposes, these things that you're supposed to accomplish. And one of them is to level up, right? Like guys that are leveling up are the happiest people you'll meet. They'll be the most fulfilled. Guys are out there kicking ass, getting to that next level, taking their hits on the chin, not quitting. They're the ones that you see are in that state. Like, and those are the guys you want to be like, and they're kicking ass. And the guys that aren't, the guys that are sitting on the couch, or the guys that are in this peasant mind of being entitled and feeling like they're owed something, are the most unhappy people. And so there's this real programming God has given us that if you wake up to and stop trying to force life onto your terms and start accepting life on its terms, you'll realize that there's this process of like, you go to these next levels, and each level, in my opinion, has like a boss at the end of it, like something really, really hard that's going to teach you something. And when you get through that, you have this kind of respite a little bit, a calm before the next storm. And then you get back in that leveling up process, and there's another big boss to tackle with a lot of little bosses along the way. And so one of the things that I have learned in that process of observing that is, at least in my life, that being a fairly accurate framework, is that I need to take that time before the bosses to be getting myself in mental, spiritual fighting shape. So I can't just go flat footed into that, like just half cocked, not ready. So one of the most important things you can do is structure your life every day so that it's forcing you to do things that are hard to do. And so when I go to the gym, I love that Joe Rogan said this, but I've been doing this for years. When he said, he just articulated in a way that was better than I had in my own head. But I work out really hard at the gym every single morning. And I don't do it so that I can look awesome. I mean, that's a great side benefit. I do it so I'm somebody that I trust. I do it because I do something really, really hard in the morning, and that's my therapy session that gets me ready for the rest of the day. Like, I go bust my ass, and if I can go run 10 miles on the treadmill at a 7.5-minute pace, I can do anything that day. Like, I'm ready for it. So a lot of this is how I start the day, because I think one of the things I've observed over the years in many men is that most of us, we wake up every day feeling like crap. Like, you get out of bed, at least for me, and I usually have some degree of anxiety or grumpiness or whatever. I'm behind the power curve. I've got these bricks in my backpack. I'm waking up to, my knees hurt, my feet hurt, I'm wobbling into the bathroom. And if I don't do something to change that, again, to prepare myself for the day and ultimately for these boss moments in life that are going to come, if I don't get out of bed preparing to win, by default, I'm preparing to lose. So I got to get up and execute, because I feel like shit. And if I don't change that, I'm going to feel like shit for the rest of the day. And then that's going to be the rest of my life. That's going to be the future. So I get up in the morning. The first thing I do is I go straight down into my office. I got this from Tony Robbins, and I do a meditation session with me and God, where I put myself and God into the state of me dumping out all the negativity, all the things, all the bricks, all the garbage, all the poor ways of thinking, and try to harmonize my will with God through a process of gratitude, through a process of manifestation, through a process of releasing my fears and my anxieties and all my bullshit, and then breathing in. It's kind of this breath work process. I do that every single morning, and it's 20 minutes for me, roughly, about it, 20 to 30 minutes. And after that 20 to 30 minutes, I'm feeling great. Like, all that crap that I woke up with is gone, right? Like, so you can change this state, but nobody tells you this. Like, I didn't have my father tell me this. I thought when I woke up every morning feeling like shit that I was an anomaly. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm not doing life right because I feel like crap every time I wake up, and realize every guy is kind of dealing with that. And that's part of the programming. That's part of this intelligent resistance that forces us to be uncomfortable and step up, that God has created for us. So waking up with some bricks in your backpack is not a bad thing, but keeping them in your backpack and not doing anything about it is, because they will stack and they'll become overwhelming, and then you're going to suffocate underneath the load. It's going to crush you. So you got to figure out intelligently how to remove these bricks. And so meditation, prayer, scripture study, and then the gym. And at the gym, I don't listen to music anymore. I listen to really high level podcasts, really high level content. So I'm programming my brain with things that I want to think or feel or understand better. And then after that process in the morning, dude, I'm in fighting shape. I'm ready for that day. And then if I do that day after day, I'm ready for life. Like whatever life throws down the pipeline, dude, I'm ready to take that hit on the chin and take it with pride because it doesn't knock me out anymore. Now I just get back and throw another punch back, and I'm ready to do that because every day I'm executing in a way that keeps me in fighting shape. And it's forcing me to do things that are uncomfortable. It's forcing me to do things that are healthy for me. And it's forcing me to kind of level up. And I have to create that framework for myself. It's going to look different for everybody else, but I would say that's the number one thing is just keeping yourself every day in some state of fighting shape.
Man, fucking love it, man. Love it. And listen, for this full disclosure, this is the first time that him and I are talking, all right? Because you're speaking my language. I believe in having a morning ritual. Like if you don't have a morning ritual, man, you are reacting to life. And I'm glad that you said it because a lot of people think that I lie when I tell them like 99% of the time I wake up with fear, with anxiety, like feeling like I don't want to fucking do this today. But then you have to overcome your mind. You have to have a process, meditation, gratitude. And I'll share meditation with you. I have meditation that I tap into fear. Like everything I'm afraid of, man, I just face it that moment. Like my wife getting sick, I face it. My kids getting sick, I face it. My business failing, I face it. Me getting sick, I face it. So for about a 5-minute process, I go into this deep, dark place and then I release it. And I realize it's just an illusion because most of the time, all the stuff that we fear is never going to come to life. But if you tackle that, it's like sparring with your biggest opponent on the first round. Then the next rounds, the other opponents are not going to be as bad. So I'm glad you said that, brother.
Bro, you and I are the same person, man, and we've never had a conversation together. So this is so cool because I think as men level up and as you draw closer to the truth and form your life around what is actually working, you start to find everybody else is kind of doing the same thing because we're all in the same boat and you start to kind of coalesce together. And this is just one example. Like I do the same thing. I'll be oftentimes in my meditation, I'll face the fears I have. Like, what is it I'm afraid of today? What is it I'm dealing with? Fear and anxiety. But I also do the same thing where I put myself in a simulation of like, what's the worst thing, the thing I'm most afraid of, and sit with that and like be okay sitting and staring that thing in the face in your meditative state and then letting it go and letting it know that it has no control over you. There's something so intensely empowering about it. And it makes me feel like I'm closer to God in kind of a strange way.
Awesome. So another thing I wanted to discuss is how do you deal with, I call this the dark warrior, right? The darkness, like that version of ourselves that wants to explode with our wives, with our kids. Like if shit doesn't happen in our way, we just want to explode. And I think that when people talk about toxic masculinity, I believe that they're talking about the dark warrior that's being used unconsciously, right? I don't believe in toxic masculinity. I believe in consciously masculinity or unconscious masculinity. So when the dark warrior shows up, it's if you don't control the dark warrior is going to control you. So what is the process? What's your relationship with that dark side of you? How do you use it? How have you learned to use it? Or how do you tap into it?
Whoa, man, that is getting deep. And I think that's, yeah, I've got to give that some thought because one, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a side of every man that should be there. So one, it's not shameful to have this side of you that has rage when you need to be that guy, where you got to let that guy out. And those are, in my experience, far and few between, but I've had to bring that to the surface on some occasions. And I'm grateful that I had it. I remember Joe Rogan talking about this, where he was saying he called it his bitch voice, where it was this voice in his head that was just chirping at him, telling him what a loser he was all the time, and like how pathetic he was. And this isn't exactly the dark warrior analogy.
Oh, that's the imposter. That's the imposter talking to you every single day.
Shit on you all the time. And he recognized, because I think he's one of the wisest guys that we have in our contemporary culture right now. He recognized that voice was actually healthy. Like it kept him grounded and kept him from being egotistical and arrogant, being so full of himself. It kept him in this state of like kind of being self-aware, but he couldn't let it run the show. So he has to put it in his he calls it his little bitch box or something like that, like where it's there kind of chirping, but it's not the dominant voice in your head. And so I really think, inside of us, we have these multiple voices. We have a king voice, we have a full voice, we have a dark warrior voice. We have all these different voices that are going to turn up at different times. And one of them is usually more dominant than the other. And usually it's that bitch voice that's controlling the narrative in our head. If we're not conscious about it, we're going to have this constant erosion of our confidence and something always kicking us when we're down and telling us we're losers. Whatever voice you listen to is going to be the voice that determines your future. And so as I become more self-aware, a lot of this is meditation practices and a lot of other things like this, like discussions, and books that I've read, that I have realized that I can control the voice and I get to choose what voice is going on in my head. It's not easy to do. It's a constant awareness of it and constantly working at it. And at least I haven't perfected it. I've gotten a lot better at it, so that it's that king voice that's talking to my head. But I don't try to squash all the other voices. I still want that little bitch voice there. I still want that dark warrior voice there. I still need like a counsel, but I want the main voice of that counsel to be the king voice. Somebody who is masculine, in control of his emotions, somebody that's a provider and a protector, and a man that's leveling up and going out there and trying to help other men do the same thing and other people do the same thing. Like that's, I think, what the king voice sounds like to me, and one that's encouraging, that talks to me from a point of like almost like a coach voice, like, dude, you sucked at that, but that's okay. You're learning. You're going to do better next time. Learn this, do this next time better. Instead of that bitch voice, like, you're a piece of shit, you just suck. Now it's like a coaching voice. It's like helping me like think through how I could have done that better, but not from a place of shame or criticism, from a place of like, I love you. It's weird talking about how you love yourself, but I do that all the time. I'm like, bro, I love you. I see how you're trying to, kind of talk to myself in third person. I see how you're trying to hustle. I see how you tried to do that and you sucked and you did a bad job of that. I see that, but I recognize your intentions and this is a way you could have done it better. And so I just try to be really, really mindful of what that voice is that's going on in my head. And I think to really bring out the voice that you want, you have to be so meticulous about the programming that you put in your head. What are you reading and what are you listening to? If you're sitting on social media, just scrolling through reels and getting put in these echo chambers and listen to a whole bunch of bullshit, how can you expect to have a king voice in your head? Yeah. You're going to have a bitch voice in your head. You can't. Like it's impossible. You can't white knuckle your way into this. So what you got to do is make these really intelligent decisions. Like, how do I want to think? How do I want to like project? And so then you listen to content and you read content and you have conversations like this with other men that are leveling up and doing great things. And you start to change slowly this voice in your head, and the king voice starts to emerge. And so I think you're spot on, man. Exactly what you're saying. I think there are these voices, and we have to be conscientious about which one is doing the most talking in our heads.
You know, I think that we're going through a process of men realizing that, number one, they're not alone. Okay. And that's the story that we tell ourselves. I'm the only one going through this shit. I'm the only one going through this problem, right? Number two is asking for help is not weakness. You know, I remember 20 years ago getting into personal development. I used to think, oh, motivation, working on yourself, loving yourself, that's for weak men. I'm trying to make some money, man. Once I make money, then I don't need anybody. That was in my 20s, that was my whole mindset. I'm gonna become a billionaire, and like nobody could tell me nothing. It was like Kanye. Once I get my money right, nobody's gonna tell me nothing, right? But then I realized that I wasn't taking care of my body. I wasn't taking care of my family. I was just focusing on one thing. But now more and more men are realizing, shit, I don't have to do this on my own. Number one, I need a tribe. And number two, like nobody's gonna do this for me. Just like you said, nobody's coming to save me. One of the videos that I love about the content that you created was one of the videos that said that men don't get the praise until they die. I think it was like 15 minutes of praise they get after they die. And that hit me because we don't have a men's day. When was the last time I said, hey, today's men's day? We're gonna celebrate men. No, we're not celebrating men. We're just cutting men's balls off, right? So, but it's up to us. But we have to learn how to appreciate ourselves. I used to have a problem appreciating people because I didn't think that I needed appreciation. I don't need to tell me how good I am. I know how good I am. You don't have to tell me anything. But then I wasn't able to tell people how good they were because I wasn't able to appreciate myself. So as I've learned to appreciate myself, I'm able to appreciate the people around me. And from that place, give love, not from I want you to give me love back because I'm giving it to you, not a transaction, but more from being filled. Like I love myself. I am my biggest cheerleader. And from that place, not egotistic. It's more of like, man, now I could give back to you because I'm filling my cup. So what do you do to fill your cup? What I call feeding the king. What do you do to feed the king so you don't have to get the love from your wife, from your kids, from your employees to feel good about yourself?
I think one of the primary things that you can do goes back to what we were just talking about learning to trust yourself. So I think for men, the currency that we deal with in life is confidence. And when we have confidence, then we're doing really good things, not ego, not cockiness, but an abiding sense of confidence. When a man is confident, he's good at what he's doing. And he looks outside of himself because he has the bandwidth to do that. Like he can serve other people, he can see who's struggling, and he can be there for them. And when you are in a confident state, it's in a very fulfilling state. And so this goes back to everything that we're talking about. But I think you have to make deposits into your competence account. This is how I articulate it in my head. Like I have an account that has my competence in it, and I have to make sure I'm making a lot of deposits into that because life every single day is going to take withdrawals out of that. You're going to start taking hits. Things aren't going to go the way you want them to go. And if you have enough currency in there, it's okay. You can take those hits. It doesn't mess up your day. It doesn't fuck up anything. You're still good to go. But if you don't have anything in your account, that's where things really start to go sideways. And you really, really get off track is when you no longer have confidence as a man, and now you're just getting your ass kicked. And I think like, it's kind of like this, I think of every day as kind of like storming the beaches of Normandy, man. It's like, you got to go up and charge that hill, man. And there's going to be a 50 cal aimed at you, and there's going to be mortars dropping around you. And if you're not taking beach, if you're not conquering real estate, so to speak, you're getting pushed back. And eventually you're going to get pushed back into the water. And eventually you're going to get pushed back far enough that you don't have a lot of options. You're drowning. All you're trying to do is keep your head above the water. So you constantly have to put yourself in this fighting shape. And Hormozi talks about stacking undeniable evidence, right? That you can trust yourself. And so to me, that's how you feed it, is you do enough things, you make enough right commitments to yourself that you're going to keep every single day. And every time you keep a commitment to yourself, it stacks a little bit in that deposit. It puts a little deposit into the confidence account. So you just keep making commitments, and you can they can be subtle. They don't even have to be significant. In fact, they should start as small commitments. Find small commitments you can keep with yourself that's going to push the needle just a little bit. And you just keep doing that, and you start stacking up this confidence. And now when the days hit and shit's going sideways, you're ready for it. You're like in fighting shape. Sure, bring it on, man. Because I've got this whole stack of confidence I can draw from. And now it doesn't affect me. Like I can roll through that, and I'm still confident, and I can still keep going on to whatever the next challenge is that day. But you better bet your ass when I wake up the next morning, I'm putting deposits in my confidence account. Like I've got to do that, because I got to be taking that sand every day. I got to be charging that hill. Otherwise, I'm going to finding my ass drowning in the water.
1%, man. That's it. 1%. That's what I talk about all the time. Consistency, commitment builds certainty. It's 1%. Just 1% better, 1% stronger, 1% faster. And there's no such thing as staying the same. Nobody stays the same. You're either growing or you're suffering. You're either moving forward or you're going backwards. Men think, well, I'm not going to do anything today. Things are going to stay the same. No, things are always going to change. So let's switch gears a little bit to relationships, Adam, because that's one of the main pain points of most men, relationships. My wife and I, we have a podcast called God, Money, and Sex. And we get a lot of questions from men and women about how to stay together. My wife and I have been married for 25 years. I know you have a beautiful wife too. And I think you have a baby too, a newborn, right? How old?
Yeah. A little 9-month-old. I have 4 kids, but my youngest is 9 months right now.
Awesome. Tell us what's your protocol for the relationship. Do you have a protocol? Do you have what do you guys do to keep the connection going?
Yeah. So I've been married twice, and my first marriage, I applied all the worldly wisdom, the wisdom that I got from church, the wisdom that I got from the world, the wisdom I got from my family, and it was a total disaster. And I look back on it and I see how I tried my best, but I wasn't equipped to do it the right way, because I didn't understand what it meant to be a man. I didn't understand what it meant to be a husband. Nobody had really taught me that. And what I had been taught was like the worst kind of advice. So, when I went into the second marriage, one is you got to pick really carefully. So I encourage every young man out there, before you get into a really committed relationship, is wait till you're 30. You're not mature enough for most men. Some are, but most aren't. You're not mature enough to deal with it when you're young. You got too much on your plate. You got too many fish you got to fry. So the first thing is be patient and work on yourself. Get yourself into the best shape that you can be in. And I don't mean just physically, I mean everything, because you attract what you are, not what you want. So whatever you are is what you're going to attract. And so when you're a freaking 20-year-old kid, you're not much. So you're going to attract not much. Unless you're really lucky or really blessed, you're going to have statistically a really unlikely positive outcome from that. So one, guys, don't be in a rush, and don't treat women like they are the end game. The end game is you, because you are your end game. You are your product. That's the only thing you have direct control over. So that's what you're working on. And all these other things in this video game, this leveling up, a woman is like the prize at the end of one of the bosses, right? You get the girl, and that's awesome. And you want to have a vibrant monogamous relationship. My wife is my best friend, and she's the most important person to me in the whole world, but she's not my purpose in life. Yes, it is my purpose to provide for her. It's my purpose to protect her, because it's my purpose to be a man. That's my purpose. And so the first thing when I married my wife, that my second wife, understanding this, having a little bit more wisdom, is that I made this, I just made it really clear when I was communicating that she understood who I was and where I was coming from. And I had this conversation with her. I said, babe, I love you, and I'm going to turn up for you, and I'm going to treat you like a queen. I'll do all those things, and I will provide for you, and I'll protect you, and I'm going to be a very, very good husband and father. But I'm never going to be a bitch. I'm never going to be less than a king. And if you ever try to treat me like that, I will leave. Like, it won't be a question of like let's work through this and go to marriage counseling and stuff like that. If you ever feel like disrespecting me is okay, this isn't going to work, because I'm not going to disrespect you. So don't dare bring that my way. And she's very good about that. And it's only happened a couple of times where she's intentionally disrespected me over the course of our marriage for the last 3 years. So really uncommon, but that has gotten addressed immediately. And I've stood my ground on that. I said, if you're going to continue to do this, I'm going to leave. I don't care what we have. I think there has to be accountability baked into a relationship. And this idea that if you just love somebody, you can throw everything out the window and throw caution out the window and throw a framework out the window and just love each other is absolute horseshit and bullshit. It doesn't work. You got to treat your relationship with your woman like a business that you care about. And you got to understand as a man that you are the leader in that business, not her. You can't put things on her, like to expect her to lead out. That's your job as a man, because a woman wants to follow man. They want a confident man. They want a king. And it'll make them a queen, but that's what most women really, really crave that. And so I've got to like execute, meaning I got to know what buttons to push with my wife, what levers to pull with my wife, like what works for her, what doesn't work for her. I got to understand that. I got to have like some KPIs, like how well are we doing, like measuring this stuff. Like I've got to put a lot of effort into making sure my relationship works really, really well. And then I've got to give her boundaries, just like she's got to give me boundaries. She needs to tell me what works for her and doesn't work for her, always from a place of respect, of course, but like, hey, I need this. I don't need this. That's part of a good marriage. My wife gives me boundaries. I want to respect that. I want her to give me all of her boundaries. I welcome that because I want to understand what she needs so that I can operate as a better husband for her and have better connection with her. But I've got to do the same thing. I've got to give her boundaries. And so I've found that women are only attracted sexually to a man that they respect. And they're only going to respect a man that gives them boundaries. It's the only way to do that. So the nice guy shit doesn't work. If you're that nice guy, this is why nice guys always finish last, is because they don't have the courage. They don't have the character to give boundaries. They don't have the confidence to give boundaries for themselves. So they just get walked all over, and there's zero attraction for a nice guy, at least sexual attraction. No chick is long-term attracted to that. So you can't stay in that state of mind. You got to execute like a king, which means you got to take accountability for everything in your relationship and fix what you can and get better and more knowledgeable. And then make sure you have boundaries for yourself and for your wife, and vice versa. It goes both ways, but I think that's one of the most important aspects of a healthy marriage, just management and boundaries.
Love it, man. I have an acronym for NICE. Never in control of execution. Never in control of execution. Meaning you're never going to get laid with passion.
I'd write this down. That's
never in control of execution. That's a book that helped me understand the mindset of being a nice guy is No More Mr. Nice Guy. Great book.
Oh,
I recommend to everybody, like, because we become pleasers, and that's what I believe. The pleaser mentality doesn't lead. The pleaser mentality is just passive. Right? Whatever you want, honey, whatever you want. Like, I'm just here. And it's because we give everything to our business and we go home and we give our wives the leftovers. Right? So now she's dealing with leftovers and we don't have the capacity to even fight. So that's why we're like, hey, whatever you want. I don't want to fight today. That's awesome. So let's finish up with a more technical question, because a lot of the guys that I talk to, they struggle with putting their messages out in the world. They want to create an impact. Like they want to bring insights to the world, but like, man, Raul, I don't have a perfect life. I don't have a perfect, story. How did you start putting content out there? And what's your process to put content instead of just being in your head? Like, do you have a process? Do you have like a day of just, going to the office and just putting content together? Do you, in the daily basis, are you writing things down, your ideas? What's the process, the creative process that you have right now?
Yeah, so first and foremost, again, it goes back to that idea of filling your head with good things. So it's constantly digesting content out there that's going to make you a better person. Because when you do that enough, it just starts to like change the way that you think. And then you get these ideas just constantly going off in your head, or these insights. You'll see something, be like, wow, dude, I wish somebody had told me that. I just saw it because I read a book and I put these two dots together, and all of a sudden there's like this combination of the two that's creating this new authentic idea. And I'm like, man, I wish somebody had told me that. And so a lot of the content that I'm doing is just kind of those epiphany moments, but it comes from the content that I'm digesting in my life, like the things that I'm reading and the guys that I'm talking to and the podcasts that I'm listening to. And so you get enough of that going, it pops in my head. And so then I just have a notes on my phone that I'll write in like titles on that, like, okay, like this, and it'll kind of jog my memory when I go back to it. Just thinking about I've even typed up entire scripts for it. The interesting with this social media process for me is, and I don't know how many men can relate to this. Maybe I'm curious your experience on this, but part of the social media that's been really interesting to me is I had no desire to do this. None. Like my businesses are kicking ass. I'm making great money. I'm not doing this to make money. None of that. I just had this nagging voice that was constantly like talking to me, like, you need to start talking, and didn't tell me what to do. It was just this voice for years that I felt. And I'm just like, shut up. I don't need that stress in my life. I've got so many good things in my life. I've got great business, great family. I'm healthy. Why do I need more on my plate? I don't need that. But I just kept feeling this really naggy in my soul, in my head, like start talking. And so I did it. And it was, I mean, I don't feel like I'm somebody that cares that much about how other people think, but you realize when you put yourself out there that it's a lot. It opens you up, and you get a lot of negativity whenever you start speaking your mind on stuff. And so I've been doing this for 7 months now, or 8 months. So I'm kind of pretty new, I guess, relatively speaking. I would say for the first 5 months, every single day, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I hate this. Like, it's too much work. It's too much headache, and there's too much negativity. And there's a lot of positivity, but you get these moments. But I will say this, that voice stopped. So I didn't have that voice nagging at me. That was relieving. And then you have these moments where you have really, really beautiful experiences with people in that space where guys are reaching out to you and they really need help. And you're like, damn, like, one, it gives you perspective and it gives you empathy. You're like, a lot of these guys, they have nothing. And that's what I realized is, like, I had all this stuff that I was grateful for. And I got to now go out and try and help people. Like, that's what that voice was for. I've learned that. Like, there's so many guys that don't have mentorship. They don't have tribe. They don't have any direction. They've never had any, they're in some shitty situation with a dead end job, and they've been wrecked by a divorce, or they got a really crappy relationship. And they're just like, they're lost, and they're at their ropes end every single day. And so when you start to talk to them, and you talk to them in a way that's authentic and meaningful, it resonates. And then you get these really beautiful, positive experiences. This is kind of not exactly what you're asking, but that's been kind of the process for me, is feeling like I had a purpose, like that this was what I needed to do, not something I wanted to do because I was trying to make money or trying to be cool and trying to get a bunch of followers. Yep. But I needed to do this. Like, this was important, and it was something I didn't want to do, which is often like the thing you're supposed to do, right? More often than not, the stuff you don't want to do is like, okay, that means it's kind of like an indication that that's what I need to do. It wasn't something I want to do. And then I just have been trying to just, like, I've done this my whole life, but read, study, and be a student and try and learn as much. And so then when you're a student long enough, you can kind of start to teach some of these things. And most of the things I'm teaching, I'm still learning. So I don't pretend like I'm some expert on any of this stuff. It's stuff that we're all learning. But you start to make some of observations, and you start to get a little bit of wisdom and a little bit of, like, you're no longer that bright-eyed kid. You're now kind of a seasoned gunslinger, been around the block a time or two, and you can now share some stuff with these younger guys coming up, and it's meaningful and it's helpful, and it's so much good in spite of the negativity that comes.
Love it, man. Love it, because you're not attached to an outcome. You're not attached to the followers. You're not attached to the clicks. And I think that's where a lot of people get too much in their heads, because they're attached to validation. Like, I want you to like my post. I want you to comment. I want you to make me feel good. And that's the inner work. The moment that you know that you're doing it because you've been called to do. That's what you heard, the calling, right? And I remember when I heard the calling of speaking and doing conference and helping men, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm building my real estate company. I'm making money in my real estate company. I don't need to do this. But then the voice was there and didn't leave me alone. And this last conference that we had, I had this bracelets made that I give my guys, and it says, "Not today, motherfucker, not today." So that's the mantra. When I hear that negative voice, I say, "Not today, motherfucker. Today I'm gonna live with purpose. Today I'm gonna go all in. Today I'm gonna find my code to the edge." So, brother, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you, man. I appreciate you, and I know we're gonna do more things together. So last words for anybody who's listening to you right now. What are some last words you want to give them?
Yo, not today, motherfucker. That's the last words, man. Get after it, dude. Don't let today beat you down, man. Take ownership of it. Yo, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I continue to follow your content, loving every second of it, man. And I love these connections, and I hope to see you soon, man.